The strange signal appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning. Tom Wilson sat at his desk in the SETI station, sipping his third cup of coffee when the computers started beeping. At first, he thought it was another false alarm. They got plenty of those. But this signal was different. It was clear, strong, and definitely not natural. "Hey, come look at this," he called out to his supervisor, Dr. Jane Addams. She hurried over, her eyes widening as she saw the readings. Within hours, every major observatory on Earth had confirmed it. Humanity was receiving its first message from an alien civilization. The excitement lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, the message was decoded. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning, or more accurately, a threat. To the developing species of Sol 3, the message began. "You have been observed and evaluated by the Galactic Empire. Your civilization has reached sufficient technological advancement to be of notice. You will be integrated into the Empire as a vassal species. Prepare for our arrival in 5 planetary cycles. Resistance will result in extinction." Captain James Walker stood in the United Nations emergency session as the message was read aloud. He watched the faces of world leaders grow pale, saw their hands shake. Some argued for immediate surrender, others wanted to fight. A few suggested trying to negotiate. But Walker had seen something in the message that others missed. The Empire had called Earth Sol 3, a technical designation. They hadn't bothered to learn what humans call their own planet. It showed arrogance, yes, but more importantly, it showed carelessness. The Empire was so confident in its power that it didn't think details mattered. That was their first mistake. Walking to the podium, Walker cleared his throat. The room fell silent. As head of Earth's small space defense force, his opinion carried weight. "They've given us 5 years, he said, his voice steady. "They think that's a deadline. But they've just handed us our greatest advantage, time to prepare." In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. Old enemies became allies. Border disputes were set aside. Resources were pooled. The United Earth Defense Coalition was formed, with Walker as its military commander. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of scientists studying the signal discovered that the Empire used an outdated form of quantum encryption. They weren't being careless. They simply hadn't updated their technology in centuries. They had no reason to. When you rule the galaxy, who could challenge you? Their second mistake. Under the oceans, away from prying eyes, humanity began to build. Giant shipyards were constructed in the deepest trenches. Old nuclear submarines were converted into construction platforms. Every scrap of space technology humans had was analyzed and improved upon. 3 months before the deadline, an Imperial scout ship arrived early. It was cloaked, but Earth's new detection system spotted it immediately. Walker made a bold decision. He let it watch. The ship observed what appeared to be a primitive civilization barely reaching for the stars. It saw outdated satellites and clumsy space stations. It didn't see the fleet hidden in the oceans. It didn't detect the quantum shields being tested in underground bunkers. It didn't notice the thousands of stealth fighters waiting in secret bases around the world. The scout ship left, presumably to report that Earth would be an easy conquest. Their third and final mistake. As Walker stood on the bridge of humanity's first true battleship, hidden deep beneath the Pacific, he allowed himself a small smile. The Empire thought they were coming to collect a new vassal. Instead, they were about to learn a lesson that every human child knew. Never underestimate someone you've backed into a corner. The countdown to the Empire's arrival had begun, but it wasn't Earth that should be worried. It was time to show the galaxy why humanity had survived every challenge it had ever faced. The Empire wanted to make humanity bow. They were about to learn why that was impossible. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Dr. Alice Thompson stared at the piece of alien technology in front of her. It was a damaged shield generator from one of the Empire's scout ships, recovered by Special Forces teams who had been tracking the vessel's movements. She had been studying it for 6 months, and today, something was different. "Try it now," She called to her assistant, Mark, who stood behind a protective barrier. He pressed a button, and the generator hummed to life. On the testing range, a laser blast hit the shield, and instead of breaking through, the energy was absorbed and redirected. Alice smiled. "Call Captain Walker," she said. "Tell him Project Mirror is ready." Across the world, in underground bases and secret facilities, humanity was preparing. The Empire had never faced an enemy quite like Earth, and they didn't even know it yet. Commander Robert Stone walked through the massive underground hangar in the Rocky Mountains. Around him, hundreds of workers assembled sleek black ships that looked nothing like traditional space vessels. They were smaller, more agile, built with a single purpose: to strike fast and vanish faster. "How's the stealth system coming along?" he asked his lead engineer. "Better than we hoped," the engineer replied. "We've figured out how to mask not just our energy signatures, but our gravity footprint too. These ships will be invisible to every Imperial scanner we know about." Stone nodded. The Empire relied on big, powerful ships that could dominate through sheer force. But humanity had learned different lessons through its history. Sometimes, the smaller fighter could beat the bigger one, if it was smart enough, fast enough, and most importantly, if it couldn't be hit. In the Pacific underwater base, Captain Walker reviewed the latest reports. Dr. Thompson's shield technology was revolutionary. By studying the Empire's weapons, she had created a defense system that could actually learn from attacks and adapt. The more the enemy fired, the stronger the shields would become. But the real genius was in how they were building their fleet. The Empire would expect to find primitive ships cobbled together from basic space technology. Instead, they would face vessels that combined the best of human innovation with reversed-engineered Imperial tech. The underwater shipyards were Walker's idea. The Empire would be looking for signs of military buildup in space or on land. They would never think to scan the ocean floors. Humanity had turned its greatest defensive advantage, being a water world, into the perfect cover for preparation. 4 years into their preparation, Earth was ready for its first real test. A second Imperial scout ship entered the solar system. This time, they were prepared. "Launch the test unit," Walker ordered from his command center. A single ship, piloted by Commander Stone, rose silently from the Pacific. Its stealth systems made it completely invisible to Imperial scanners. It approached the scout ship, gathered detailed scans of its systems, and returned to Earth without ever being detected. The data they collected was priceless. The Empire's ships were powerful but predictable. They hadn't updated their basic designs in centuries. Why would they? They had never needed to. That night, Walker called a meeting with his top commanders. "The Empire expects to find a primitive species ready for conquest," he said, looking at each face around the table. "Instead, they're going to find an enemy they never imagined possible. Every weakness they have, we've studied. Every strength they rely on, we've found a way to counter." He pointed to the holographic display showing Earth's hidden fleet. "We have 1 year left. 1 year to perfect our weapons, train our crews, and prepare for a fight that will change the galaxy forever." Dr. Thompson spoke up from her seat. "The Empire thinks they're coming to teach us our place in the galaxy," she said with a grim smile. "But we're going to teach them something instead." "And what's that?" Stone asked. "That humanity doesn't bow," Walker answered. "We break those who try to make us." The Imperial fleet appeared exactly when they said they would. 1,000 ships emerged from hyperspace, their massive forms blocking out the stars as they approached Earth. At their center was the flagship, twice the size of the others, its hull decorated with the symbols of countless conquered worlds. High Admiral Duck stood on his command bridge, looking down at the blue planet below. His white uniform was spotless, his medals gleaming under the bright lights. 5 centuries of service, and this was just another routine conquest. "Send the standard greeting," he ordered. His communications officer nodded, and the message was broadcast across all frequencies. "People of Sol 3, the Galactic Empire has arrived. Your integration begins now. Lower your planetary defenses and prepare for occupation. You have 1 hour to comply." In the underwater command center, Captain Walker watched the Imperial fleet's formation on his screens. Everything was exactly as they had predicted. The Empire always used the same approach: overwhelming force, standard formations, and absolute confidence. "They haven't scanned below the oceans yet," Dr. Thompson reported from her station. "The water distortion field is working perfectly." Walker nodded. "Send the response we prepared." On the Imperial flagship, Dux raised an eyebrow as he received Earth's message. It was a simple video showing the leaders of Earth's nations, looking appropriately scared and submissive. "Great Admiral," Earth's spokesperson said, trembling slightly. "We accept your terms. Our defenses are being lowered now. We only ask for time to prepare our people for the changes to come." Dux smiled. They always begged. It made victory so much sweeter. "Begin the landing sequence," he ordered. Standard occupation pattern. The first wave of Imperial ships began their descent toward Earth's atmosphere. Their sensors showed only a handful of primitive satellites and a few small space stations, exactly what they expected from a world at this level of development. That's when everything changed. The oceans began to move. At first, it looked like massive waves, but then massive shapes emerged from the depths. Hundreds of ships, their black hulls gleaming wet in the sunlight, rose from every ocean on the planet. "Impossible," Dux shouted as his sensors suddenly came alive with warnings. "Where did they?" He never finished the sentence. The first volley from Earth's fleet struck the descending Imperial ships. Dr. Thompson's adaptive shields absorbed every return shot, growing stronger with each hit, while Commander Stone's stealth fighters slipped between the larger Imperial vessels, striking critical systems before disappearing again. "All ships, battle formation," Dux ordered, but it was too late for proper organization. Earth's vessels weren't following any pattern the Empire recognized. They moved in ways that should have been impossible, appearing and vanishing, striking from impossible angles. In the command center, Walker watched the battle unfold. The Empire's ships were powerful, but they were fighting the way they always had, the way they'd fought for centuries. They hadn't faced a real challenge in so long, they'd forgotten how to adapt. "They're trying to regroup," Stone reported from his fighter squadron. "Standard Imperial defensive circle." Walker smiled. "Just like we thought they would." "Dr. Thompson, are the shields holding?" "Better than holding," she replied. "Every shot they fire teaches our shields more about their weapons. We're already at 150% efficiency." The battle had been raging for less than 10 minutes, and already the mighty Imperial fleet was in chaos. Their rigid formation had been shattered. Their landing forces were in retreat, and for the first time in centuries, they were facing an enemy they couldn't simply overwhelm. On his flagship, High Admiral Dux watched in horror as his perfect formation fell apart. These primitives weren't supposed to have this kind of technology. They weren't supposed to fight like this. They weren't supposed to be winning. But they were. The Empire had come expecting a simple conquest. Instead, they had walked into humanity's carefully laid trap. And this was just the beginning. Commander Stone's fighter squadron cut through space like black arrows, weaving between the massive Imperial ships. His pilots moved in perfect formation, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. But humans had always been good at learning quickly when their survival depended on it. "Target their command and control systems," Stone ordered through the secure channel. "Remember your training. Hit and fade. Don't stay in their firing range." The Imperial ships were trying to track them with their weapons, but it was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The human vessels were too fast, too agile, and most importantly, too small for the Empire's targeting systems to lock onto effectively. On the flagship, High Admiral Dux was shouting orders that were increasingly ignored. His perfectly organized fleet had dissolved into chaos. Ships were firing in all directions, trying to hit enemies they couldn't properly see. "My lord," his second-in-command reported, We've lost contact with 30% of our fleet. Their communications are being jammed somehow. Impossible. Dux slammed his fist on his command console. These primitives shouldn't even understand our basic systems, let alone be able to. An explosion rocked his ship, Dr. Thompson's latest creation. A modified Imperial weapon turned back against its makers had just torn through the flagship's outer defenses. In the underwater command center, Captain Walker watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The Empire's mighty fleet was being taken apart piece by piece, not by overwhelming force, but by 1,000 careful cuts. "Dr. Thompson," he called out, "how are the adaptive shields holding up?" She checked her readings with a satisfied smile. "Every shot they fire makes them stronger. The Empire's weapons are powerful, but they're all based on the same basic principles. Once you understand one, you understand them all." A massive explosion lit up the space above Earth as one of the Imperial heavy cruisers lost its power core. The blast should have taken out 3 human ships nearby, but their shields absorbed the energy, growing even stronger. "All units," Walker broadcast, "move to Phase 2. Begin the synchronized attack." This was the moment they had trained for. Hundreds of human ships suddenly changed their seemingly random attacks into a coordinated dance of destruction. They moved in waves, each group covering the others, creating patterns that looked chaotic but were precisely planned. Stone led his squadron straight for the Imperial flagship. "Remember," he told his pilots, "they expect us to attack head-on. That's how they fight. That's how everyone they've ever conquered has fought." But humans had learned different lessons through their history. They had learned from guerrilla warriors who defeated larger armies. They had learned from submarine commanders who struck from the depths. They had learned from every underdog who had ever overcome a superior force. The flagship's defenses were strong, but they were all focused outward. Stone's squadron slipped through a blind spot in their sensor coverage, one that had existed for centuries because no one had ever thought to look for it. "Now," Stone ordered. His ships released their special weapons, tiny, smart missiles designed by Dr. Thompson. They burrowed into the flagship's hull like mechanical worms, bypassing its shields completely. Within seconds, they had reached their targets. The mighty Imperial flagship didn't explode. Instead, it simply went dark as every system shut down simultaneously. High Admiral Dux stood in his now powerless command center, watching through the windows as his fleet fell apart. These humans weren't fighting like a primitive species should. They weren't fighting like any species the Empire had ever encountered. They were fighting like humans, and for the first time in his 5-century career, Dux felt something he had never expected to feel: fear. In the command center, Walker allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. "Send the message," he ordered. Across every Imperial communication channel still functioning, a simple message played. "This was your only warning. Leave Earth space now, or the next attack won't be so gentle." The first strike was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. High Admiral Dux stood before the Imperial Council, his once pristine uniform now showing signs of battle damage. The massive chamber was silent as he delivered the news of his defeat. "These humans," he said, his voice shaking with rage, "they are not what we thought. They have weapons we've never seen, tactics we've never encountered. They must be crushed completely." The Council agreed. Within hours, the Empire's largest fleet ever assembled began moving toward Earth. 5,000 ships, including the dreaded planet killers. This time, there would be no demands for surrender, only destruction. Captain Walker received the news with calm determination. Their spies in Imperial space had warned them this was coming, but humanity had planned for this too. "All ships, execute Operation Hornet's Nest," he ordered. Commander Stone led the first attack. Instead of defending Earth, his ships jumped into Imperial space, striking supply lines and communication centers. They appeared from nowhere, caused chaos, and vanished before the Empire could respond. "Another fuel depot destroyed," Stone reported back. Their main fleet is running at 60% capacity now. Dr. Thompson's latest invention was making this possible. She had cracked the code of Imperial jump drives and improved them. Human ships could now make shorter, more precise jumps. While Imperial ships needed to follow set hyperspace lanes, Earth's fleet could appear anywhere. "My lord," an Imperial officer reported to Dux, "we've lost contact with the 7th Supply Fleet, and the 4th, and the 2nd. Dux watched his mighty armada slowly grind to a halt. Without fuel and supplies, even the largest fleet was useless. But he still had one advantage: numbers. "Order all ships to advance," he commanded. "We will overwhelm them with sheer force." But humanity had learned from history. Like the Mongols of old, they knew that an army moving forward was only as strong as its supply lines. While Dux pushed toward Earth, human ships were systematically destroying everything behind him. In the underwater command center, Walker watched the Imperial fleet's progress slow to a crawl. "They're still coming," he noted, "but at this rate, half their ships will run out of fuel before they reach us." Dr. Thompson looked up from her station. "Captain, I've finished analyzing their planet killer weapons. You're not going to believe this." She was right. The Empire's most feared weapons used massive amounts of energy to tear planets apart. But they had one critical weakness: they were designed to hit targets that couldn't move. "Send the data to all ships," Walker ordered. "Prepare for Phase 2. As the Imperial fleet finally came within range of Earth, they found something unexpected. The planet was gone. Not destroyed. Hidden. Dr. Thompson's shield technology had advanced so far that it could now bend light around an entire planet. To Imperial sensors, Earth was invisible. Impossible. Dux stared at his scanners in disbelief. Find them. But his ships were scattered, searching in the wrong places. That's when Earth's fleet struck again. This time, they didn't hide. Hundreds of ships appeared in perfect formation, their weapons powered by energy stolen from Imperial ships during previous battles. Dr. Thompson's shields had not just absorbed enemy fire, they had stored it. "All ships, fire," Walker commanded. The space around Earth lit up as humanity's fleet released weeks of stored Imperial energy in a single devastating barrage. Imperial ships, their shields designed to deflect energy weapons, were overwhelmed by their own stolen power. In his flagship, Dux watched his mighty fleet crumble. These humans hadn't just developed new weapons. They had studied the Empire's every weakness and found ways to exploit them all. "We must retreat," his second-in-command urged. "My lord, we must." "No," Dux cut him off. "The Empire does not retreat. The Empire does not surrender. The Empire—" He never finished the sentence. The battle for Earth's solar system was about to enter its final phase, and the galaxy would never be the same. News of Earth's resistance spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved species watched recordings of human ships defeating the Empire's finest fleet. Hope, long forgotten under Imperial rule, began to stir again. The first to rebel were the miners of Alpha Centauri, a race the Empire had enslaved centuries ago. They took control of their orbital facilities and turned the mining lasers against their oppressors. When Imperial ships arrived to crush them, they found human vessels waiting in ambush. "The Alpha Centauri miners have control of their system," Commander Stone reported to Walker. "They're asking for our help to hold it." Walker smiled. This was exactly what they had hoped for. "Send them our shield designs and stealth technology. Show them how to adapt their mining ships for combat." In his command ship, now hidden in an asteroid field, High Admiral Dux received report after report of new uprisings. The Belters of Orion's Ring, the Warriors of Proxima, the technical guilds of the core worlds, all inspired by Earth's example, all now fighting back. "My lord," his second-in-command said quietly, "the crews are talking. Many of them. They're starting to question our methods. Some are even saying the humans might be right." Dux turned sharply. "Arrest anyone who speaks such treason. The Empire has ruled for 10,000 years. We cannot be defeated by primitives and slaves." But his words rang hollow. In the weeks since the battle at Earth, everything had changed. Dr. Thompson's adaptive shield technology had spread to other races, teaching them how to turn the Empire's weapons against itself. Commander Stone's guerrilla tactics were being copied across the galaxy. The Empire's greatest weakness was finally exposed. It had grown too rigid, too set in its ways. It couldn't adapt to these new threats, couldn't understand these new ways of fighting. In the underwater command center, Walker received a surprising message. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're getting signals from within the Imperial fleet. Multiple ships are requesting permission to defect." This was the moment they had waited for. The Empire's iron grip was built on fear and blind obedience. Once those began to crack, everything else would follow. "Tell them," Walker ordered, "that Earth welcomes all who wish to be free." The defection started slowly. A few ships here, a squadron there. Then entire battle groups began turning against their commanders. The Empire's mighty fleet was eating itself from within. Dr. Thompson had anticipated this too. She had designed a simple way to modify Imperial ship systems, removing the tracking devices and control protocols that the Empire used to maintain its power. "The revolution is spreading faster than we expected," Stone said during the emergency council meeting. "But Dux is gathering his loyalists for one final push. He'll try to make an example of someone soon." Walker nodded. "That's why we need to strike first. All our allies are in position. The freed worlds are ready. It's time for Operation Avalanche." Across the galaxy, on every world where beings dreamed of freedom, preparations were made. The Empire had spent millennia building its power through fear and domination. But humanity had shown the galaxy a different way. Unity through cooperation, strength through adaptation. All ships, all allies, Walker broadcast on the secure channel they had shared with their newfound friends. Prepare for the final phase. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history appeared around Earth. But this time, it wasn't just human ships. Vessels of every shape and size, from every corner of the galaxy, gathered for one purpose: to end the Empire's reign forever. High Admiral Dux looked at his tactical display with growing horror. He had started this conflict expecting to crush one primitive world. Instead, he had sparked a fire that would burn the Empire to ashes. The final battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. The final battle began not with a grand charge or a mighty blast, but with a simple message. Captain Walker stood on his bridge, looking at the massive fleet of Allied ships gathered around Earth, and sent his last communication to High Admiral Dux. "You can still surrender," Walker's message said. "End this without more bloodshed." On his command ship, surrounded by his remaining loyal forces, Dux laughed bitterly. "The Empire has never surrendered," he replied. "We would rather die than bow to primitives." "That's the difference between us," Walker answered. "We never wanted you to bow. We just wanted you to learn to stand together with others." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. Dux threw everything he had left into one massive assault. But he was fighting an enemy that didn't think like the Empire, didn't move like the Empire, and most importantly, didn't fear the Empire. Commander Stone led the first wave, his mixed fleet of human and alien ships moving in patterns that looked like chaos, but were actually perfectly coordinated. The Empire's rigid formations shattered against this fluid defense. "Now," Stone ordered, and Dr. Thompson's final invention came into play. Every Allied ship activated their modified shields at once. But instead of just protecting themselves, the shields linked together, creating a massive energy web. When the Imperial ships fired, their energy didn't just get absorbed. It was shared and redistributed among all Allied vessels. The Empire's greatest weapon had become its greatest weakness. Every shot they fired made their enemies stronger. Impossible. Dux watched as his fleet's weapons proved useless. "How can they?" "My lord," his second-in-command interrupted. "The crew. They're refusing to fire." They're saying, they're saying they won't fight their own people anymore. That was the moment the Empire truly fell. Not from weapons or tactics, but from the simple reality that its own people had seen a better way. Ship after ship lowered its weapons. Crews across the Imperial fleet began shutting down their systems. The mighty empire that had ruled for 10,000 years ended not with an explosion, but with people simply choosing to stop fighting. Only Dux refused to accept it. He ordered his flagship to ram the Allied fleet, determined to die in glory. But his own crew sealed him in his quarters, ending his reign with a quiet click of a locking mechanism. In the aftermath, Walker stood in the great hall of the former Imperial Palace. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered to decide the galaxy's future. But unlike the Empire's grand councils, everyone had a voice here, from the smallest mining colony to the largest stellar nation. "We don't want to rule," Walker told the assembly. "Earth has no desire to replace one empire with another. Instead, we propose something new, a federation of free worlds, where every species has an equal voice." Dr. Thompson presented her final gift to the galaxy. All of Earth's technological innovations, freely shared. "Knowledge shouldn't be hoarded," she said. "It should be used to lift everyone up." Commander Stone, working with former Imperial officers who had defected, began transforming the Empire's military into a peacekeeping force. "We'll defend freedom," he promised, "not threaten it." The galaxy entered a new age. The Empire's rigid hierarchy was replaced by cooperation. Its hoarded knowledge was freely shared. Its fear was transformed into hope. And on Earth, in the underwater command center where it had all begun, Walker looked at the latest reports from across the galaxy. Trade was flowing freely. Former enemies were working together. New discoveries were being made every day. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "the Empire thought they were coming to teach us our place in the galaxy." He smiled as he watched ships of 1,000 worlds moving peacefully through space. "Instead, we taught them that the galaxy works better when no one is forced to know their place." The Empire had expected to find primitives to conquer. Instead, they had found teachers who showed them a better way. And the galaxy was better for it.